I feel like I've been talking so much about tariffs that the word itself has completely lost meaning to me. Like, I literally started calling my children little tariffs, like, hey, tariff, eat your vegetables. Or that may be like a new insult. Like, if you're hanging around with the broskies and one of them is being kind of douchey, you can just tell them to like stop being a tariff. I don't know. I'm so over it. I'll be brutally honest. And the fact that there's so much politics involved, or anytime you talk about tariffs, it's very difficult to get into it without being political, or at least referencing some political issue. And I just don't like that. I don't like talking politics, especially on this channel where it's nothing but action figure collecting. However, there is something that came up in my feed over the weekend where essentially I guess there's a new 8% tariff being added to anything that's being sold through Super 7, whether it's in stock or whether you're going to actually pre-order the figure. It doesn't matter. There's going to be a tariff attached to it, an 8% tariff. Now, if you have ever watched any of my Super 7 videos, I essentially go out of my way to bash the line. I'm not a huge fan of them. I think they're comparable, even though they don't have the attention to detail and the sculpt work that NECA does, but I compare them to NECA a lot. I think they're kind of very similar. They seem to prioritize the exact same things, better attention to the paint apps, and then way more accessories than any other manufacturer. However, usually before the price hike, you could pick up NECA action figures for about $35, whereas in the Super 7 Ultimates line has always been $54.99, which I think is an outrageous markup, not to mention the reaction line, which is essentially just like a tiny little 4-inch retro action figure that has like 5 points of articulation, and I've seen them for well over $20. I think the markup recently brought these figures to about $20, but if they're like an exclusive to a certain retailer, you can expect to pay somewhere along the lines of like $22, even as high as $25, depending on the exclusivity of some of these figures. But I think they're massively overpriced. I think they have a ton of QC issues, as far as I know, because I do watch reviews every now and then of these figures. I have not dabbled with this line. It's another one of those lines that's always on the back or the back burner here for me personally. It's always kind of on the wish list, but if it just doesn't fit into the budget, or if there are other reveals, other releases that I'm way more interested in, especially if they're Marvel Legends, Black Series, or McFarlane, I'm going to pick those up rather than picking up a Super 7 action figure. Having said all of that, I don't really get it. My initial response to this news, or to some of these postings online, and some of the rants that I've seen so far, is pretty straightforward. What did people expect to happen? It's crazy to me how people will go out of their way to claim that these manufacturers are trying to do their consumers dirty. Well, look, and brutally honest with you guys, yes, I do feel like they've been doing a lot of shady work behind the scenes, but what did they expect? This is what's going to happen. This is the future of the collectible community. We're gonna have to get used to it. I think eventually we'll see some pretty shady practices from Hasbro, from McFarlane. They may cut down a lot on the QC checkups. A lot of the figures maybe get by because the production standards have lowered now. They're not going to be throwing as many figures out. I'm sure they'll find ways to tighten up their production, but at the end of the day, there's no way that these companies are going to be able to sustain their production while still marking up their figures with the new tariffs. Now, I don't know exactly how the tariffs are going to work. From my understanding, they're going to be charged depending on how much the manufacturer is paying for each of these figures. So again, this is just pure speculation. I don't think that they're going to pay the full, or they're not going to get tariffed the full amount. I think it's just whatever they're shipping the item over here for. Let's assume that they're shipping the Super 7 Ultimate action figures for, I don't know, $20 each. Let's just assume that it's about that price point. The tariff would bring those figures up to, I don't know, like almost $30. Could you imagine a $30 markup on these figures? You would be paying close to about like $80 to $90. Again, this is just math off the top of my head. We don't have like the official numbers. I don't think even these retailers know exactly how it's going to work, or maybe they do, but they're still working out the math on each individual figure. What it sounds like to me is they're going to kind of like spread out the costs amongst everybody, right? I think whatever it is that they're collecting right now, even if it is in stock merchandise and they charge that extra 8%, they're assuming that they can recoup a little bit and then pay that towards the figures that are on their way where they're actually going to have to pay the tariff price. They're trying to balance it out through their entire, inventory through their entire merchandise, which I think is pretty smart, because if they just come at you guys and try to tariff the new pre-order figures, those prices are going to be astronomically high, and most people will just not pre-order action figures. So at the end of the day, I think the name of the game here is essentially just survival. That's it. It's just to try to survive this, span of time. I think most of them are assuming worst case scenario, as soon as there's a new, elected president, that they decide to kind of do away with tariffs. Or best case scenario, this is just a negotiation tactic from the elected people in office to try to get some better deals from the overseas manufacturers. We just don't know exactly how things are going to play out. But as of the moment of this recording, the tariffs are here. And a lot of people try to hide under their covers. They try to spin these stories around and try to make it seem like it's Hasbro or McFarlane. And look, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think inflation is a real thing. For those people that complain about Hasbro marking up their prices recently, but I clearly remember seeing Marvel Legends at that $20 price point for what felt like an entire decade. Like, they literally maintained that price point for an insane amount of time. I think it was actually kind of impressive. I remember even my wife thinking back to buying some Marvel Legends to my oldest son, and I clearly remember paying about that $20 price point. Like, it was at a reasonable price for an extended period of time. Does anybody remember how long McFarlane held out before raising his regular DC Multiverse action figures to $22.99? If I'm not mistaken, he lasted like almost a year past what Hasbro was able to last. I think inflation is a real thing. If you really want to compare apples to oranges here, take a look at what's happening with gas prices over the last few years, whether it's a gallon of milk, whether it's you wiping your ass with toilet paper. Like, all of that stuff has had an incremental price point, and it just makes perfect sense that these hobbies or these collectibles are also going to garner a little bit of an inflation price point. I'm not defending any of these OMs. As I said before, if they do some shady work, if they do something that I disagree with, I'm usually very open to criticizing them, but this is not the time. As bad as Super 7 has treated their consumer base, as overpriced as they may be, I don't think this is their fault. I think there are a lot of people out there that are being completely brainwashed by the media or their political parties. And that's one of the main reasons why I tend to stay away from politics. At the end of the day, all you can really focus on is yourself and what it is that you believe, your true beliefs out there. And sometimes your personal beliefs don't align with any one particular political party, or you're kind of, torn down the middle a little bit. And I think that's what I'm seeing from a lot of the collector community. But there's also a huge amount, and I just saw a comment in one of my previous videos of somebody trying to spin all of this and trying to blame Hasbro for some of their markups, even though they technically haven't even marked up their figures for the tariffs. I think that's just the retailers. But if you go through Amazon, and I think Hasbro polls, they're still not marking up their stuff. So it's just a matter of personal perspective. In my personal opinion, I think these companies are simply trying to survive. They're trying to outlast this whole tariff situation, and this is the best, I think the best solution out there. They're trying to tariff, or they're trying to add a little bit of an extra fee for stuff that's right now in stock. That way, once the pre-order stuff comes in, or the merchandise or the collectibles that are overseas are about to hit stores, or once they're being shipped over and you have to pay that tariff, then I guess that price point kind of balances out. In the end, you're not paying a huge markup. And I think a lot of different retailers, or I've heard a lot of different stores adding extra little fees here and there to some of their in-stock items, just to try to prepare for a lot of these tariffs. And as I said, it's about survival. I don't think any of these companies are really trying to step on their consumer base. I don't think that they're trying to take advantage of them. I think priorities here, I think, is just to keep the consumers. I think their main objective is to just try to survive. Their profit margins are going to be absolutely slashed, but I don't think that their objective here is to try to, step over the consumer, because at the end of the day, if they really try to go out of their way to, throw all of the tariff charges onto the consumer, they're going to lose a lot of consumers. And not only now during this tariff situation, maybe a lot of them don't decide to come back into the collecting community. So they're simply going to try to find ways to cut costs here and there. Maybe they don't add enough accessories. Maybe the paint apps aren't great. Maybe the QC issues are going to be more apparent. But let's be realistic here. Let's stop being brainwashed drones. Actually do your research. This has nothing to do with any of the manufacturers. Are they constantly giving us, subpar collectibles? Are they constantly doing some pretty shady work? Yes. But what's happening at this particular moment in time in history, I think has 100% to do with the tariffs. And if you really want to find the culprits responsible for all of this mess, I think we all know who to point the finger at. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of personal perspective. It's a matter of personal opinion. Let me know your thoughts down below. Are you okay with these type of shady practices? Do you believe that other manufacturers will follow in their footsteps? And also, if you are a fan of Super 7, will you continue to support them after all of this? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you guys enjoyed this type of rambling action figure content, this random nonsense, make sure to stay tuned. We do this pretty consistently. We're doing it on a daily basis, and hopefully you guys enjoy watching it as much as we enjoy putting it together for you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Stay safe out there. Enjoy the hobby, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.